I still see infographics now using the percentages that came from Cowspiracy. I still see people talking about and referencing Cowspiracy. And it goes back to that there is actually a proper way to say it. There's a word, a terminology that talks about how like once you learn something, you have to, have like 7 to 10 more counter arguments to unlearn that. And I think that happens in the food space a lot, especially now with social media. You see one person state something on a reel, you learn that, you're fearful of it. And no matter how many times you see someone debunk that or redact it, like you can't get over, that first exposure to it.
Hello, fans and listeners. Lindsey Elizabeth Cortes, sports dietitian, female athlete nutrition specialist, and your host. I apologize for those watching on video that I'm awkwardly holding my microphone during this episode. My microphone stand broke, and I hope it didn't create too many additional noises in the background of this recording, where I have two amazing guests. I'm so excited to have them on the show because I feel like it's a topic that I care about and yet never feel fully comfortable speaking about, and that is the good quality, nutritional quality, and good intentions of dairy farmers and cattle ranchers here in the United States and the benefits that beef and dairy and milk can bring to our diets, because there's a lot of noise in the media about just concerns. There's a lot of fear mongering about these foods, and yet my standpoint as a dietitian is that they're loaded with nutrients and can be such a healthy thing to eat. And I do believe that, hey, there's good and bad people in the world, no matter what industry we're talking about. But I do believe that the majority of farmers are in the industry for good reason, because they care about not just the product they're producing, but the animal that is producing it as well. And this is what our guests, Tara and Natalie, are here to talk about. So let me read off their bios. Tara Vander Dussen and Natalie Kovarik are modern millennial women trailblazing a fresh conversation around food, agriculture, and rural living. As co-hosts of the top-ranked DiscoveringAg Podcast and TV series, they bridge the gap between consumers and the agricultural world, offering engaging, relatable, and eye-opening insights into where our food comes from. Tara is a fifth-generation dairy farmer and environmentalist scientist from New Mexico, known for her expertise in agricultural sustainability. She's spoken at SXSW, the United Nations, and beyond, bringing a dynamic, science-backed perspective on food production. Natalie, a fourth-generation cattle rancher and social entrepreneur from Nebraska, is redefining what it means to live and work in rural America. Through her storytelling and hands-on experience running Kovarik Cattle Company, she connects audiences to the realities of ranching food and Western culture. When we started this episode, I was a little lost for words as I had a frantic morning with the kiddos and was running behind schedule. But as we get into our conversation, it just flows, and Tara and Natalie really just drop some amazing knowledge and share just the history of being farmers and nutritional benefits of these foods. So what you're going to hear us talk about are hormones in dairy milk, raw milk, pasteurization processes, grass-fed beef versus grain-fed beef, different benefits like omega-3 quality between the two beefs, different breeds of beef, or breeds of cattle, I should say. And we even talk about beef tallow and what it is and how it might be appropriate in our diet, because that's a trending topic right now. So I went into this conversation with them kind of wanting to talk about these hot topics, maybe bust some myths or learn some new truths. And I hope that you find this topic educational, eye-opening, and that it guides you on your journey to fueling better. As a full disclosure, I am somebody who consumes dairy and meat in my diet, and I am happy doing that. I have a lot of clients who do not, whether it be that they just don't eat meat or they don't eat dairy or they're completely vegan or completely vegetarian. And one thing that I tried to express in this episode is that there's not one right way to eat. So I do believe that these are powerhouse foods that are extremely beneficial to our diet, and I would encourage people to eat them. But if you have reasons that you do not want to or cannot want to, that's okay, because there are lots of foods that provide us nutritional benefit So that's kind of maybe a conversation for another day. This is obviously an episode where we're encouraging these foods. And if you are plant-based or vegan, I would still encourage you to listen it to learn and understand these foods and food groups. And it's totally a personal choice if that's something you want to eat or not. I hope that makes sense. That's enough of a disclaimer for the episode here, and enjoy. Well, thank you so much, Tara and Natalie, for coming on the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We're very excited.
I think that what we're going to talk about today will be kind of a newer topic for my audience, because I think with my background, there's some, I like to stay open-minded. I have a lot of clients that, want to be vegan or plant-based, and many who eat meat and dairy as well, like I do, many who are flexible, and I try to meet clients with where they're at. But you two, with your background and expertise in dairy farming and raising cattle, I think this will be a great kind of topic to dive into and be a little more forward about the knowledge that you have with these foods and how they affect our health and the world as well, and sustainable agriculture, which you both are so interested in. And so I'm really excited because I think historically I take more of that, like, I'm going to do whatever is best for the client, which I still do when I'm working with clients. But this will be nice to kind of learn some more facts about dairy, about cattle. And I'm so excited to have experts like you two on the show.
Yeah, I feel like right now in the current food movement, there's just a lot of noise and conversation about, beef and dairy and all foods. But we're excited to kind of dive in with you and kind of share our perspective, obviously, as like a farmer and a rancher.
Yes. And so just to hear quickly from both of you, and I read it off in the bio, but this is like you guys were raised on the farms. This is your life. It's embedded in your family, many generations. Could you just share a little bit of both of your experiences of what's that like to be born and raised on, a dairy farm or a cattle ranch, and to now be so passionate about it in your careers as well?
Yeah, it's kind of my story is funny. Natalie and I have definitely a lot of overlap, even though we grew up on very different operations in dairy, very different places in the country. But I am a fifth generation dairy farmer, and I married a fifth generation dairy farmer. So, as you said, it is definitely long in our history and our heritage. But so I did grow up on a dairy farm, and then I was a classic small town kid who was like, I'm going away to college and never coming back. And so I actually went and got my degree in environmental science and genuinely thought I was not coming back until almost my last year of college. I started dating my husband, who was back home and was a dairy farmer. And so long story short, I ended up moving back to my hometown and getting married, and now raising my family on our family dairy farm. So we dairy farm with his family, his parents, his brothers, and their families. And so, yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, it obviously feels very serendipitous and like a tale as old as time almost, that I would end up back on the dairy farm when I was so adamantly, thought I was going to go and do something else and live in the big city. But now reflecting back, I don't know how I thought that. I truly love it. Coming back did feel like coming home. I think that when you grow up in agriculture, it's really a part of who you are at your core. And so, and getting now to raise my daughters in a very similar lifestyle, it's just very rewarding.
Yeah, it just runs deep in probably your values and how you were raised. I feel that too. I when I moved away for college also was I'm moving on. And I've, unfortunately, the way life has happened, I haven't been able to move back home, and I really miss it. And I'm seeing that now as I have my own children. I want to get back home now, and I want to raise them how I was raised. So, but I think we need to expand ourselves in order to see what's really important. So how about you, Natalie?
Yeah, so a little bit similar of a story. My husband and I ranch in Nebraska right now, but I actually grew up in southwest Montana. So really, really pretty part of the state. And as you mentioned, I grew up on a cattle ranch there. Like Tara said, it definitely, agriculture, that farm, ranch, country kind of way of life has a way of, I guess, placing roots in your heart without you even realizing it. Because I, too, ended up choosing to do something non-ag related. And so I actually went to college for pharmacy. And I had planned to move back near our family ranch. And, I did. I was living about a half an hour from it. So I spent a lot of time on our family ranch, and agriculture remained a part of my life that way. But that's kind of how I saw agriculture being a part of my life. I didn't envision it differently I really enjoyed my job. I was working as a full-time clinical pharmacist in a hospital in like a bigger city, quote unquote, bigger city in Montana. But I loved it. I loved healthcare and I was really happy. And then lo and behold, I also met my husband who was a cattle rancher in Nebraska. And that's kind of what brought me full circle back around to ranching, raising my kids on a ranch, being on a ranch, getting my income derived from agriculture. And so it is interesting, when you opened this up, you said, what's it like? And it's funny because part of me, having a little bit of different exposure, realized how different of a lifestyle we really do live. But on the same note, I feel like it's kind of all I know. Just growing up, it's like your norm is your norm. And so some of the things that Tara and I have as in our experience and our background doesn't seem odd to me. But now sharing online and having our podcast, I realize it really is odd. It's like 2% of the population only lives the way we do. And so it is different, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah. And I actually want to tie in the fact that both of your degrees, like in pharmacy and environmental
science,
how actually I think these pull together really nicely in agriculture, just thinking about like health in the environment. So it's more than just the beef and the milk. It's how does this affect health, and pharmacy's medicine, but it's you were dealing with patients' health and thinking about how the animals that you're raising and how you're treating them and how that affects the environment. And I think this is where in media so often there's like such a big push for like plant-based and veganism. And I think a message, and you guys can share this better than I can, but that you probably want to get out to the public is that you care about the environment and you care about these animals. I don't know if you want to speak to that message.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about sustainability, so that's actually once I got my degree and I came back, I spent 10 years as an environmental consultant in the dairy space. So working with dairy farms on, I always joke, the back end of their dairy. So I didn't work with the cows or like the milk production. I worked on, like manure management, soil health, water conservation. But a big piece of sustainability was actually like herd health. So that's our number one. Like there's all these stats I could list off of how much dairy farms have improved, like reduce their carbon footprint, reduce water use, reduced land use, like all these things. And at the end of the day, truly at the root of it is like herd health, the longevity of the cow, like all of those things. Like the healthier a cow is, the less inputs there are for that cow and the more milk she'll produce. Like a healthier cow produces more milk. And I know sometimes people don't love that conversation because they're like, oh, are you pushing the cows too hard? Like the word efficiency. And it's like, no, it's rooted in herd health. And so they're so closely tied. And then like, when you think about sustainability, there's like, it's a three-legged stool, right? Like there's three components to it. And another piece of that is the economic side. Like to be more sustainable truly at its root also should mean a better business outcome. And so I think that people don't always see those aspects like working in conjunction, especially in mainstream media, right? Like that's not the picture that gets painted. But when you like come onto the farm and at its core, they're so closely tied together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes why when you're in the industry, you struggle to talk about some of these things in a way that other people can kind of digest. Because when you're outside of agriculture, a lot of pieces, you see them individually. Maybe that they don't correlate. Like you're talking about an animal welfare issue and you think it's just that. But as Tara alluded to, when you get on farms and ranches, you realize that like absolutely everything is connected. So when someone is talking about like good meat in the grocery store, for us, that ties into like the bigger conversation, as Tara alluded to. That ties into really good land that you're raising the animal on. That ties into a really healthy animal to make a good piece of meat at the end of it. And so like, I feel like I always struggle in these conversations because they'll kind of bring in one component. And as Tara alluded to, it's like, no, it's like everything. It's so circular and encompassing when you're on a farm and ranch, like that it all ties together. So in order for us to be good farmers and ranchers, we have to care about the land and the soil, and we have to care about our animals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that because I'm somebody who, I always say I could never be vegan because I'm obsessed with dairy. I just like eat cheese and milk and yogurt. I don't know that I go a day without it ever. But it's just like, it's understanding that this isn't just a for-profit thing. This is the people who are doing this love what you do. You're born and raised in it. You're taking care of the animals. You're taking care of the land. And I love that your extra background in environmental sustainability and even pharmacy, just like understanding the whole big picture of it. And thank you for sharing that. I thought it would be really fun for today's episode to just go over some like myths of these two food groups, dairy and meat, red meat, cattle. I don't know, whatever the best term to describe it, right?
You're doing great.
Thank you. So I thought we could go over those two just like in depth with myths that you two have heard so often and you're constantly dismantling them, and just kind of dive into them because I think that's something my audience hasn't fully heard. So I wanted to first dive into the concern over hormones in milk products. And you see it on nearly every milk carton. It's like cows have not been treated with RBST. Could you just like share a little bit about what is the history of using hormones in dairy cattle, and does that translate into hormones in our milk, and why do we have that label saying not treated with hormones? And share a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're diving right into it. I love this. This one is such an interesting conversation because I think that like the story of it is going to like really surprise you. So the label you're referring to is the RBST, and it was like a naturally occurring hormone like in cattle, but obviously a synthetic version was created and was given to cattle. And let's just say it, like consumers did not like it. Like they did not like it. But what's funny is most dairy farmers didn't like it either. And I know my dad tried it out, I want to say in like maybe the 80s, and almost immediately, like it's funny talking with him. He was just like, nope, didn't like it. It wasn't worth the cost. Like I just didn't see a difference. I didn't love like how like a cow health outcome. My dad is not a unique story. I think that's the story of a lot of dairy farmers. And so a lot of them had transitioned it out voluntarily, and it was very limited use. By then, the damage was already done. Consumers did not love that use of that product. It's still approved by the FDA. It's still considered safe. There is no harm like for human health from cows treated with RBST. But it has completely been phased out of use in the United States. I'm trying to think, maybe in like 2020, it was like officially like there are no herds treated with RBST for milk like on the shelf. And yet it's still a piece of the conversation for consumers. So you will see it, as you said, on virtually every single dairy product, fluid milk product that's on the shelf. You'll see that notice that says not from cows treated with RBST. I know there's like some formal, legal way they have to say it.
Yeah.
And so it's honestly like a non-issue. Like I don't know how else to tell consumers like it's not something like you even need to be worried about, but it's probably going to persist on labeling just because consumers are concerned if it's not on there that it means something, like the absence of it means that it is in there. And so beyond that with hormones, I mean, there's no like quote unquote added hormones in milk. I mean, milk is just milk. There's naturally occurring hormones, I'm sure, as you know, I'm sure as a lot of your audience knows, in all products from vegetables to every single product that's on the shelf. And so that's a big consumption or misconception that there is something added, and there's absolutely not something added. But also RBST is not something people have to worry about anymore.
That's what my understanding was from the dietetic side of thing, is that one, we don't have proof that it negatively affects our health, and two, it's not even in our milk. So why are we still talking about it?
Insane. It's like, I can't believe I don't want to say mistake because I know why. Like we were looking to, improve herd health. I mean, we do try things along the way. And I'm like, this thing we tried in the 80s, like you're talking almost 50 years now that we're still, and I'm sure there was dairy farms still using it into the early 2000s, like obviously, but it's still wild to me because it just feels like a non-issue.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it brings up like two really big picture topics though that are important to discuss when it comes to our food. And one is that it's really hard to unring the bell once it's been rung. Mm-hmm. And like going back to one of the most, infamous animal documentaries that obviously paints agriculture and cattle and beef in a very negative way is Cowspiracy. And one of the main foundations that film is based upon, one of the studies, actually had been revoked, and they had miscalculated the outcomes. They compared footprint of cattle, the entire cycle, to just the tailpipe of cars. So, they didn't compare two total life cycles studies. They just took, one partial from the automotive industry and then the entire life cycle of agriculture and compared them. So the scientists had to redact it. They had to come back and correct the percentages.
there was, you would like to say there was a big deal made out of it, but at the same time there wasn't, right? I still see infographics now using the percentages that came from Cowspiracy. I still see people talking about and referencing Cowspiracy, and it goes back to that there is actually a proper way to say it. There's a word, a terminology that talks about how, like, once you learn something, you have to, have like 7 to 10 more counter arguments to unlearn that. And I think that happens in the food space a lot, especially now with social media. You see one person state something on a reel, you learn that, you're fearful of it. And no matter how many times you see someone debunk that or redact it, like, you can't get over, that first exposure to it.
Especially if it's something that implants fear in your mind. And that's that's what Cowspiracy did. I struggle to watch those nutrition documentaries because I get so angry. I can see through, like, oh, you're trying to manipulate, you're twisting the story. So I actually never watched Cowspiracy. I think I watched Forks Over Knives a long time ago. And, like, I think there was another one that was more sports related. Wow, I should have.
Game Changers.
Yeah. But I was like, as I was watching, I was heated because I'm like, it's not that I don't like eating plants. I want people to eat plants. I want people to eat fiber and plants. Please hear me loud and clear there. But I was like, you're cherry picking studies, you're twisting it. And I did watch that one in depth, and I went down a rabbit hole of pulling up those studies and being like, they didn't summarize this correctly, or they, the statistical significance just wasn't great here. And so, but I hear you, Natalie, in the idea that once something is said, it's so hard to unlearn it. And this has happened a lot in the meat industry and the dairy industry. So, and I think too, I'm going to continue on the dairy piece for a moment. Like, okay, so there actually aren't added hormones in our milk, but a lot of people are concerned still about, like, what other additives are in milk, especially with things like, okay, pasteurization is a process to kill bacteria, but now there's milks that use, like, ultra high pasteurization to make milk, like, shelf stable or a really long expiration dates. I'm a huge fan of Fairlife milk, and one of the reasons I like it, besides the protein content, is because it lasts longer in the house. And I appreciate that I'm not wasting anything by, an early expiration date. But some people don't understand how that's happening. They think things are being added to it or, like, extra preservatives. So could you share a little bit, Tara, about the, like, quality of milk and if there's any additives in them throughout these pasteurization processes?
Yeah, it's funny you brought this up, Natalie, and I just, on our podcast, gosh, it was probably like 2 weeks ago, we covered a reel. It was a girl in a grocery store who was like, do not buy Fairlife. It has additives and preservatives. And we talked about it on the podcast, like, just how way off base it is. And people don't understand why milk is lasting, so long and all these things. And so it goes back to the fear. A lot of people, like, they fill in that, like, knowledge gap with, like, fear and confusion. If you see something online, it may feed into that. And so a few things you touched on, like a couple different things. So I'll start with the ultra pasteurization, because that is, that's in a lot of organic products. That's in, Fairlife, as you mentioned. So ultra pasteurization is exactly like pasteurization, but it's at a higher temperature for a shorter amount of time. So it is very high heat for, like, you're talking seconds of how long this milk is exposed to that temperature. And again, it obviously is, as you said, killing bad bacteria. And so the higher the temperature, obviously, the higher your rate of being able to kill things in a short amount of time are going to be, making the milk last longer. So that's one component of, these longer shelf lives and even shelf stable products. I feel like we're seeing more and more. I was just at Costco yesterday. I actually picked up, like, the single serve Fairlife. So I maxed out, like, the limit of how many you're allowed to get per customer at Costco. And they're obviously not being refrigerated. So a few other things there is the smaller the container, typically the longer it will last as well. So, like, if you notice, Fairlife is not necessarily a full-sized gallon. It's slightly smaller than that. And then you have the ones that you can put in kids' lunch pails, kind of, I think of, like, the Horizon Organic that are, single serves. And those are completely shelf stable. Some other things about those products is the bottles are not clear. They're not transparent. And that's a big piece. So, way back in the day, they had, like, amber colored bottles, but consumers, we're talking glass bottles. When you had a milkman delivering it to you, you had amber colored bottles. My mom actually has a collection of vintage milk bottles. It's really cool to kind of see the transition. But consumers wanted to see how clean and pure the milk was, how white it was. And so we went to clear glass bottles so that people could see it. And that can transition into, what I always think of as like the classic gallon of plastic, the plastic bottle of milk where you can see the milk. Whereas a lot of the products we're talking about, whether it's the organic products, the Fairlifes, the single serves, you cannot see the milk. And there is an oxidation that happens with milk that makes it go bad faster when you can see it. But again, we gave consumers what they wanted. They wanted to be able to see it. I think now we're kind of like transitioning away from that. And then there's also, I always say milk quality has never been better. So milk in is going to be milk out. The milk that arrives at the bottling plant, the higher the quality is, the better the product is. And it truly, like, milk quality, we talk about this all the time with my dad and my husband, obviously both being dairy farmers. Like, my dad will be like, what is, there's tons of different terminology, but like, what did your test come back on your milk? And, my husband, Daniel, will share. My dad's like, man, I can't believe that's like the average now. That's what you guys that's what's expected of you nowadays.
Because it's so much better than what it used to be.
Yeah, it's just constantly just getting better and better.
The bar keeps rising.
Yes, the temperature at what milk has to be at when it leaves our farm keeps getting lower and lower. So historically, like, the milk had to be less than 45 degrees. Now it has to be less than 36 degrees, which is really, really hard to get milk that cold that fast. And so it's just like little things like that people don't know. And it's all actually like really good things at the end of the day that are making this long shelf life. So to answer your question after I answered it in a really long way is nothing is being added. There is no preservatives. Even the Fairlifes where you're getting more protein, they're not adding anything. It's actually an ultra filtration process where they filter out the components of milk and like then put them all back in without the sugar, right? Like, and nothing is necessarily changing at its core. They're not adding anything. They're just taking out the sugar, which actually lactose is one of those sugars, which is the reason that Fairlife's also lactose free.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I want to clarify too, just in case, because who knows that when we say sugar, we're talking naturally occurring
I'm
lactose
glad you
sugar.
Said that. Yes.
Yeah, because some people are like, why is there sugar in milk? And it's like, well, it's natural. That's what lactose is. It's a naturally occurring sugar.
People have a hard time
Fairlife, they take it out.
With the yogurt too. Like, and there is yogurts obviously that have added sugar, but a lot of people are like, why are sugar so high in yogurt? And it's like, there's a lot of naturally occurring sugars similar to fruit in milk. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to switch this. The opposite end of the spectrum here is when you don't go through the pasteurization process and you have raw milk. This is a topic that as a dietitian, I learned right out the gate, like, that increases your risk of
foodborne illnesses.
Yeah, but what's the one specifically?
Oh, E. coli.
E. coli and salmonella. Yeah, but foodborne illnesses, because the bacteria are present and then you're consuming them. Now, obviously, there's bacteria present in yogurt that's good for our gut health, but there's a lot more pathogenic bacteria in raw milk. So as a dietitian, I was trained, you don't recommend raw milk. You recommend pasteurized milk. But this just like keeps popping up as a diet trend. And I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable recommending it. So I still do not. Now, if people choose, like, like to consume it, I'm like, that's you as an informed consumer. But that's not something I feel safe recommending on a global scale or to the general population. But I don't know. Do you have any extra comments? Like, do you consume raw milk? You're right there on site with these cows and you know how the bar is, like you said, you keep raising the bar and the quality of milk. Is that something that you feel, is safe to consume for you personally or other people you know?
Yeah, so I have a journey with raw milk, as probably most people do. Like, if you're consuming raw milk or you're questioning whether you're going to do this, it's because, you saw something, you went through like something that got you to this point, whether you had an intolerance with dairy. I think, people are looking for what works for their body a lot of times. For me personally, I grew up drinking raw milk. I drank raw milk all the way until I went to college. And then in college, just convenience, I no longer lived on a farm. So I started buying milk. When I moved back, got married to my husband, I started consuming raw milk again. And I drank raw milk all the way up until my first pregnancy. And I had a doctor who was not big on fear-mongering, and I was very upfront with him that I was drinking raw milk, and we had lots of conversations. He sent me to some studies. I started doing my own research. I was just, in adulthood and making decisions for myself, but now also making decisions for a child that I was carrying. And after looking into it, lots of conversations, even with my husband, knowing what I know about raw milk, I decided to move away from raw milk and go to fully pasteurized. We drink only pasteurized milk from then on out. And I think looking back at those two journeys, because I'm kind of split now, I've drank raw milk half my life and half my life have not drank raw milk and have not raised my kids on it. I don't believe in the notion that raw milk is a superpower food. I think milk across the board is a really great food. I think it's a great food for getting a lot of nutrition very easily, very efficiently, typically not super expensive either when you look at just like a glass of milk. And so I don't buy into that camp of like raw milk it's going to cure every disease that has ever existed. At the same time, I think in the recent years, seeing this shift of people wanting to consume raw milk and having conversations with them, I think I actually fall somewhere in the middle. I think people, as you said, like choose risk kind of every day. I let my children eat raw oysters, actually, and there is huge risk associated with that. I had a lot of environmental professors that did not allow their kids under the age of 10 to have leafy greens because they were worried about, different E. coli's and salmonellas. And so I think every day we choose risk for our families, rear-facing car seats, forward-facing car seats. The list goes on and on of what people choose. And so I've gotten to a place that I think that, I don't know if I say I want to legal, I still recommend pasteurized milk. I think pasteurization is one of the best, most effective tools. But if you're going to consume raw milk, I hope it's, as you said, informed consent. You know what you're getting into. Yeah. You know who you're buying it from. More importantly, you know their sterilization of their bottles and you know like everything that goes into that. And if you truly know all that, and that's a risk you want to take, I think that's a risk, again, you are choosing. I think the flip side of the coin is one of the issues as a dairy farmer, if someone consumes raw milk and they get sick, they blame all of dairy. It's like a black eye. It's that fear mongering we talked about. Yeah. You can't unring that bell. And I think a lot of people, if it became mainstream and it was readily available, I don't know that they would be doing all the due diligence. And maybe if we did legalize it, it would create, regulations in place where we'd be testing.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm giving really long answers, but I think at this point, I believe heavily in pasteurization. And I think that consuming milk, no matter its form, is very beneficial to your diet. And obviously I'm biased when I say that as a dairy farmer, but it is a nutrient powerhouse. And so I don't know if that helps you, but that's my journey with it.
I think that was perfectly said. And I really appreciate you just reminding us of all the risks we take in life every single day. And this is just a choice. And that's why, again, I think as a dietitian, like with a platform, I want to the general population, recommend safety first. But if you as an individual, you expressed it perfectly, you know your risks and, look into it and you feel safe and comfortable taking that risk of raw milk, then wonderful. And that's fine. I ate sushi once when I was pregnant because I was just craving it so much. And I was just like,
I definitely had sushi when I was pregnant as well.
I took the risk. And so things, there's risk in life and we just want to be informed. And I think it's definitely a bigger conversation about like policy and legalization. But I appreciate your input that milk is healthy for many people. And it's a nutrient powerhouse. And so pasteurized, raw, like there's nothing superior necessarily about the raw milk.
That's how I feel.
We can really like say, but consume it in whichever way feels right to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Natalie, we're going to give you the mic.
I know, I'm like, get me out of the hot seat and get Natalie in.
I'm always fine being out of the hot seat. I always learn so much from Tara about the milk industry, too. It's funny. People always think, oh, you're a farmer or rancher, so you must understand the entire, everything that's grown and planted. And it's like, no, we have no clue what it takes to be a citrus farmer or an almond farmer. They're very, very different than a cattle farmer. So I always learn milk nuggets. My dairy info comes from Tara.
Absolutely. Yeah. Farmer does not begin to describe the professions at all. So many different types of farmers. And funny too, you both work with cows, but different types of cows.
The first dairy cow Natalie ever saw was when she came down to visit my dairy. I love to tease her about that. And then I went up to her family's Hereford operation. And it's funny, like our breed, we obviously both have cattle. Dairy cows are very tall and slim. Like they're just a different build. And Herefords are very short and fat. And I was like, Natalie, what happened to their legs? Like they're so tiny. And it's just funny. I mean, we've both grown up around cattle our whole life, but just extremely different types of cattle.
Yeah, totally different breeds. I have a really naive question, so I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like a 10-year-old here, but do the color of cows have anything to do with their breed? Like there's like your brown cows and your white and black cows, and like, because they always do the white and black spotted cows for dairy, but like, is that true?
Yeah, black and white Holsteins are typically, dairy, but there is a Jersey breed of dairy cow, and they are brown. They actually like almost look like a deer. They're very pretty.
I've seen those.
Yep. And so there is different, even within dairy, there's different breeds, and obviously within beef, there's different breeds.
Okay. And that's not a silly question. I've been asked that before because I feel like a lot of people's, especially when Western goes trending, you'll see like cowhide, the spotting, cowhide, a lot like that print is associated a lot. And so I've been asked that multiple times before. But yeah, if you see black and white spot like that, it is not a beef cow. It is definitely a dairy cow.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, beef cows can be, a lot of them have more of like a black fur to them, right? Yeah.
Yep. So that would be a black Angus. And yes, they would be entirely black. Very common. It actually comes back down to, I think, Tara could talk about this probably too in the milk industry, but there was a period of time where, again, they called the black Angus, the board, the certification. They just did a really good job marketing that breed. And so it kind of came to the forefront in a lot of people's minds of like black Angus beef and, different things that you're looking for. And so, yeah, it was, I attribute to, there could be maybe some people that could, tell the difference between the different, you can get into Wagyu, steak, obviously a little bit different. But for the most part, black Angus, the one you're referring to, got kind of put to the forefront when it came to the beef industry just because of, I think, a really great marketing campaign.
So that's the breed name, is the black Angus beef. And Wagyu is a different breed.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Quick side story. I had the privilege to travel to Japan twice.
I figured that's where you were going.
How did you know that?
Because a lot of people associate Wagyu with Japan or Japan. Yeah. Japanese.
Yeah, because they like specialize in raising them over there. And then I spent some time on some islands, and there's like this one little dinky island south of Japan that's like known for their Wagyu beef there.
Yeah.
And
I
had some.
Oh, cool.
It was good, but I didn't have any side-by-side comparison.
Yeah. Yeah. But I had a friend that was actually just traveling across Europe the other day, and she was in Czech, and she sent me a photo because they were like highly advertising like Nebraska beef at, the Czech in Czech Republic.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really cool to see. So, we obviously raise, going back to what Tara said about milk, the United States does a really good job raising high quality beef. And so we do export that. And a lot of, states, countries are excited to get U.S. beef, which is like a cool feeling as a cattle rancher from the United States.
For sure. It's so funny how here in the U.S. we think that like food elsewhere so much better than what we have, but you go somewhere else and they're like, no, we want Nebraska beef, right?
Southeast Asia will have like milk, and it'll say like American milk, and there's a sticker that they have associated with it. And so it is funny the different and we're over here trying to be like, can we get olive oil and wine and like all these other things. So
all these other things.
It's funny what countries become famous for, what products.
It also highlights, like, this is a side tangent, not to like direct the conversation away from beef, sorry, but I do think it alludes to like obviously the benefits of like a global marketplace, right? We are kind of in like a food conversation, of food movement right now, which is like support local, eat local. And I definitely like a component or a proponent for that of, supporting U.S. ranchers and farmers when you can and stuff. But it's like also a good reminder that a lot of the foods we love, like one of the statistics I'll never forget from an article we covered on the podcast is like 8 out of 10, I think it might even be higher now, closer to 90% of avocados in the United States are from Mexico. So some of these foods we don't realize that we are, whether we are looking to just import maybe like really good olive oil from somewhere else, or we need to import, avocados. A lot of the foods we consume here, like there are pros to the global marketplace that I think we lose sight of because we can just luckily walk into a grocery store and get whatever we want, whenever we want.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it has not always been this way. I think even my parents have shared like things like, because I'm a dietitian, right? My parents would be like, they didn't even try an avocado until I was like 25 years old because we grew up in Massachusetts. There's no avocados in Massachusetts, right? But now they can because of the global market, and, we can get them up there.
Yeah. So and I'm like, California is always like, eat local. And I'm like, sure, I've been to your farmer markets. I would eat local too if I was at your farmer markets, but it looks a little bit different than, the farmer market in like central Nebraska.
Yeah, we don't all have the Central Valley of California or like Yuma, Arizona to, produce the year-round leafy greens for us if we had to eat local. And it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. And I think it's just, if you have the ability to eat local, great. but that's just not the reality. And people need to be fed. So people,
Amen.
believe it or not, even in today's society, like there's still poverty areas and they call them like food deserts, and there's still hunger going on in the United States.
Absolutely.
Still. So there's a lot of benefits of having these bigger grocery stores and moving food around globally and nationwide. So I have a few more questions about beef. Okay, so from a nutritional perspective, it's like, oh, grass-fed beef has higher omega-3 content. But I want to just ask you, like, what does factory farming beef versus grass-fed beef, or like how are their diets and lives different, and how does that really affect the quality of the meat?
Yep. Happy to answer that. Happy to dive into it. If I weave around through this, my apologies if it's a more long-winded answer, because again, it's not so straightforward. There's a lot of things that come into this conversation of when basically someone asks, like, do I need to be eating grass-fed over grain-fed? Is that better for me? And as you alluded to, there is like the health portion of that conversation. Grass-fed meat is going to be leaner, like you mentioned, and the omegas are different in them. Right now, we don't have any other studies and data to support that there is any other nutritional benefit or difference between the grass-fed beef and the grain-fed. I do think there are some scientists that are like pretty actively working on this to get into some of like the more micronutrients and start really comparing some of those smaller things to see if we can on a deeper microscopic look find differences between grass-fed and grain-fed. But for me, I kind of go back to what Tara said, like, beef is like a major nutrient dense food. And I think it is so healthy and beneficial for women, especially too, like trying to get the protein. So I don't recommend grass-fed over grain-fed. Getting into one of the, next questions I guess you asked, which is like the difference in their diet. And I think that's actually like the biggest thing I would love for anyone tuning into to take away from this, is that a lot of times you will see different creators or people sharing about and who are recommending, that they consume grass-fed, maybe through the lens of different meanings of it. Okay, so maybe they're associating it with it that is a more natural product. They're associating it with a healthier product. They're associating it with like a more environmental friendly product. Like there's a lot of these other different labels and meanings that get associated and put on the grass-fed label, and that is not what the grass-fed label means. The grass-fed label is a label that explains what the cattle ate. And the difference will be a solely grass-fed animal will consume grass forage for their entire lifespan. Okay, so from birth all the way to when they were processed, that's what they were getting, whether it was grass or hay, some sort of forage. That is what their entire diet was made up of. Now, an animal that has been, grain finished, grain fed, a lot of times that's what they'll refer to as like a factory raised animal, or big scary beef, essentially, right? There is a difference, but I think it's a lot smaller than people are aware of. So even when an animal is grain finished, they actually still start out the exact same way a grass-fed cow would. It's a cute little calf out at pasture. It's a ranch like my family's, and the calf is nursing the mother, and it is also getting, natural forage grass out at pasture. That is what the animal looks like for a grass-finished animal, or grain-finished, at the beginning. That life cycle is exactly the same. So the beef industry is segmented. There is what's called cow-calf ranches, which is like my family's, and we are responsible for, birthing the animals. We're creating the calves, we're breeding them, and we're raising the calves up, okay? So that is the start of the beef cycle. Then you move into backgrounding and stocking, and that is when you are starting to put on weight to the animal. And then you move into the feedlots, and that will be the difference. So a grass-fed animal would never enter into a feedlot, a conventional feedlot, because that is when we start introducing the grain into the cow's diet. And that is about the last 4 to 6 months of their lives. So pretty much, that's it. So pretty much about, I think some statistics are like 75%, like 2/3, like right around there. A grass-finished and a grain-finished animal have the exact 2/3 of their life cycle looks the exact same, whether it's milk and grass forage. And then it's the very end when you're putting on those final stages of grain in the feedlot setting that the animal will start to differ in their diet.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a really good study out of Oklahoma State, I think it is, that comparing like the grain-fed, only 7% of the total animal's diet is grain in the end. Like it's a very small percentage because of how long they spend out on pasture. And I think that's fascinating because again, like I didn't know a ton about beef until meeting Natalie, or not as much as I do now. And like I just feel like what we what we get shown or told is very different from what's like actually happening, which is fascinating.
And even in the feedlot setting, they are getting grain, but they're still getting a grass forage. Like it's like it's like a salad kind of diet. Like you're getting, you're still getting the grass and the forage you're feeding the animal, but you're introducing some of the grains component to it. So that's why, as Tara mentioned, that actual percentage of grain in a grain finished diet, cow is actually really, really low because for the amount they spend out on pasture and then the amount of grass that they still get in towards the end of their life too.
Wow. That's really eye-opening of how little the difference is. Now, little differences might mean a lot for some people.
And
but
so
for other people, maybe that's enough to say, oh, I'm going to save a couple bucks then and get, choose a different option.
Absolutely.
And I remember from the nutritional side, I looked into this once because like, does grass-fed beef really have more omega-3s? And it was like, yeah, it does, but it was a really small amount. And I'm like, you could just add a teaspoon of chia seeds to your yogurt and get way more omega-3s, so I'm not trying to discourage consuming grass-fed beef, but if you don't want to, there are plenty of other ways to get the benefits of the omega-3s at least, or to choose, slightly leaner protein elsewhere in your diet, whatever it might be. So you have lots of options.
Yep, absolutely. I never discourage if you like the taste of grass-fed and it's available to you and you want to purchase it and you have the, it's usually probably a little bit more expensive. So if you have the financial means to do that, by all means, like again, I love eating beef. It's like on our family, table, probably 5 out of 7 nights. Like we eat a lot of red meat. But yeah, if you've been stressing over like, gosh, the other package, if it doesn't say grass-fed on it, I'm getting some terrible product that is, animal cruelty and wasn't raised by families and all this scary thing. I can assure you that even conventional beef started on a family ranch like mine, because that's cow-calf operation there is no big ag in cow-calf operation at the start of the beef cycle. It is all families sprinkled across the United States that are raising those calves up. It gets obviously some, I think of it like the beef cycle like an inverted triangle. So if you flip a triangle upside down, at the top of it is all the families that are raising the beef. And then at the point of the triangle would be like the big 4 packers. You hear Cargill, you hear JBS. So as you go down that, the feedlot setting, it's smaller and those are usually bigger. But the start of the beef cycle is just family ranches like mine.
And most of their life is
like that as well. And a very large percentage of their life, because we'll raise them all the way up until they're ready, again, just to be fattened a little bit before they enter the feedlot stage, which is right at the end of their life cycle,
Yeah. So one other thing that's really popular in the media for like the last few months is beef tallow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love it. I'm a big beef tallow girly.
Okay, so it's funny. I admittedly never even heard of beef tallow until like last summer. So before it became super popular in the media, because one of my girlfriends was moving and one of my neighbors, and she was emptying out her fridge and she had a thing of beef tallow. She was like, you want it? I was like, I should probably try this because I'm a dietitian. I have never used it before in my life. So that was gifted to me. Cool. And then suddenly some things going on in American politics. This is like a hot topic now of beef tallow and it, being a replacement for like oils and vegetable oils, especially not just in cooking on the daily basis, but more in like industrial, like fast food operations and stuff. I don't know. Could you start with like, what is beef tallow for people who have never heard of it? And any thoughts on using it on a big scale in restaurants?
Yeah, so we've actually covered this on the podcast too, because you're right. RFK Jr. has definitely brought it to the forefront. He actually hosted like an interview in a Shake. Is it Shake Steak? What is
Steak
it?
and Shake.
Steak and Shake or Shake Shack?
No, it was Steak and Shake. I think.
Okay, I think it's a restaurant chain that is not in the Midwest. I can tell you that because I can never remember the name, so I've never been to it. But he held an interview there because we talked about it on the podcast, they were one of the first fast food restaurants to kind of embrace this and say they were going to 100% beef tallow.
Yeah.
So tallow is just a word for fat. And you can have beef tallow, you can have pig tallow, you could have, I'm sure, all the animal. I mean, those are 2 of the most common ones. But yeah, it is. And if you go to butcher, like process a cow at your, local butcher, you can personally get the tallow. So I have picked up like beef tallow from our own cattle and then rendered it myself. So it's a very simple process. Again, it is just the fat of the animal. And then, our ancestors used it for cooking. So it was, animal. That's what they used to fry their foods in or cook their foods in. You could think of it like a butter, but not, it's just an animal-based fat that you could
I would say
use for cooking.
it's funny, I didn't grow up with tallow at all in my household, but it's like, and now that I use it in my adult life, because I have a jar sitting on my counter, it's like the same as butter in my mind. It's an animal-based like fat that you would use for cooking instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I don't know the history of why we ended up moving away from that. I do know McDonald's was infamously using it for a really long time. And then I think in the 80s or 90s, they ended up switching and moving away from tallow, which is funny because they were probably one of the last.
They were like one of the last holdouts of using tallow. And then, the whole fad that like fat is bad for you, that conversation really spurred all the vegetable oils conversation.
Yeah. Yep. So, I don't know what other questions you have for it, but it can be used. Now you're seeing it not only being talked about to be used for cooking, but also as like a skincare. A lot of people, which I use it as in place of like lotion and moisturizer, I'll use a beef tallow on my skin as well. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of butter and using that in cooking and the taste. And I like the fats. I'm also a big fan of vegetable-based oils, olive oil, canola oil, because they have like the lower saturated fat and decent omega-3 quantity. But I hear you too on the skincare, because I use coconut oil, which is plant-based but high saturated fat. I actually use that as like a natural makeup remover on my skin. Mm-hmm. So I can see those fats. So I guess it's just it's a curious thing. We don't have the time to get into the seed oils and vegetable oil industry right now. So we're not going to do that. But it does seem to me that these are two different types of fats. We have the animal-based fat that's the beef tallow and going to be higher in saturated fat, which many of us need in our health and some of us might not. And then the vegetable-based oils that might be lower in saturated fat. I just want people to look at these two products as, hey, these are both fats in our diet. They might have different smoke points. They might taste different. We might have different uses, and they might have different nutritional quality without necessarily... I don't believe that one is inherently better than the other. I think they're just different.
Yeah, I actually have in my kitchen, I have a jar of beef tallow. I have a thing of butter right next to it, and I have a thing of olive oil next
to same.
I have
all three. And depending, I'm like, if I'm making an Italian dish, I'm obviously pulling out the olive oil. Right. If I like, it's just like whatever seems like the right spot for it. I will say, I was at Costco yesterday, and it was the first time they were selling Costco-sized containers of beef tallow, and I was like, what a world we live in.
It looks a lot like coconut oil, though. I mean, at room temperature, it's going to be the same white, so it's not liquid like an olive oil or anything. You think of like when, I don't know if anyone has ever fried bacon, and then my mom used to do this. She would actually save the oil from the bacon and then use that to re-grease. That's how you could think of like beef tallow.
Yeah. Which is one thing I was thinking with this rise in popularity of beef tallow. I was wondering like, oh, do we have an overabundance of it that's being wasted? I don't know if this from a sustainability standpoint, might be a good thing if people start using it more. I don't know.
Yeah, so it brings up a great point. I mean, one of the things we love to talk about in the beef industry is that we are using the animal from like nose to tail, right? So you're using the hide. I mean, there's so much from the animal that goes into other products every single day that you wouldn't even think of or be aware that like, oh, that came from a beef cow. And it is important to us to use all those different products. Right now, I haven't done enough research to say exactly like the percentages and what beef tallow is going into. I think it's used heavily actually in the pet food industry. So you would see a lot of probably the processing, like a Cargill for a common name to use, would probably be selling that, beef tallow to have it be repurposed in different ways. So I don't think there's a waste of it right now where we're like, oh, this would be really great. We're just dumping beef tallow out and now we can repurpose it and package it in this way. But we could see it make a difference to the farms and ranches if, it was
a value-added product.
Yeah, we might be exporting it or, different things with it that if we were, selling it to McDonald's or selling it to, high-end, I guess individual brands that are doing skincare products or whatever, it could change the beef industry a little bit. But I don't think so much right now from a sustainable standpoint would we see that drastically increase, because I do think we are using it just in different ways than what is being talked about it potentially being used for in the future.
Yeah. Well, Tara, Natalie, I've gone over your time. Thank you so much. And I do have more topics, but I will encourage all my listeners to tune into your podcast, Discover Ag. And what I love about your podcast is how you bring like current topics and pop culture into it. So these things I was mentioning about like beef tallow in the media, or like why is raw milk coming up again? Like you guys you're up to date with the trends and pop culture and what celebrities are doing. And you kind of bring that into your conversations as people who are in and on the ground every day and throughout your whole lives with cattle ranching and dairy farming. And thank you so much for bringing this conversation to my audience who are trying to always learn the best ways to fuel and nourish their bodies, and remembering there are many, many different ways to do that. But these are two food groups from one animal. Isn't that amazing? Different breeds, yes, but pretty amazing that we can get such good nutritional quality and health out of these food groups.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. This was a really fun conversation. And as you said, yeah, you guys can find us over on DiscoverAg Podcast. And it is not a podcast for farmers. It is a podcast for people who are curious about their food, but very much have a mix of, the pop culture references. So,
Yep. We always call it's a good mix of entertainment and information, because we have a lot of fun discovering. We cover 5 articles or topics that are trending in the news that week and talk about them. So we get some information in there. You'll learn something, but we have a lot of laughs and there's some fun things to talk about. So it's a good time too.
Yeah, so head over, tune into that, and stay up to date with Tara and Natalie. Thank you again. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Please help spread the message of empowering female athletes to be fierce, fit, and fueled by giving this podcast a 5-star review and leaving a comment. You can also help more female athletes by sending this episode to a friend. Head to lindseycortes.com for more resources, information, more episodes, ways to work together, downloadable guides and ebooks. And if you're interested in becoming a guest on the show or have a guest suggestion, head to lindseycortes.com/podcast, and there's a form for you to fill out to get on the show. Hey, there's more resources on my YouTube channel, Female Athlete Nutrition, Instagram at female.athlete.nutrition, and private Facebook group, Female Athlete Nutrition. I think you get the point. I'm here to support female athletes by fueling better and becoming fierce, fit, and fueled. Most importantly, if you need help, reach out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next show.